Welcome back. And moving on to our first segment for today. Well, discussing more details regarding the Egyptian economic growth and the real transparency and dialogue that we can talk about between the Egyptian leadership, the government from one side, and the Egyptian citizens. Always reflecting the current situation, always reflecting challenges, because we can never face it, because definitely we need the awareness. People, they need to know where exactly are we and how we all can work together and support the current situation, because definitely the main goal for all of us is the let's say development of the economic status here in Egypt. So we have the Cabinet's Information and Decision Support Center that launched activities of the fifth session of its intellectual forum, again discussing more about the economic growth here in Egypt. Well, first allow me to welcome our guest for today, Dr. Youmn Hamaki, Professor of Economics at Shams University. Doctor, good morning.
Good morning.
So before I talk about this forum, we always say that it is really of great importance, this transparency. Because when you have changes, when you have challenges, if people are not aware and are not supporting, definitely you could never have been able to achieve anything. And this is always mentioned also by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, how Egyptians supported all the citizens and are confronting and facing all challenges.
Yes, indeed, Nashwa. What we are doing nowadays in Egypt actually is how intellectuals and the most of population can share in order to address the crisis. We have to admit that we have in the middle of economic crisis and actually affected by international economic situation, the Russian-Ukrainian war, and besides, we have to address questions toward what are the best ways for Egypt to address such crises, taking into consideration not to affect seriously the quality of life for the majority of population. And this is, you know, the most important question addressed even in national dialogue nowadays and in what the, you know, the Center of Information related to Prime Minister is, you know, exerting very good efforts toward gathering intellectuals from different parts and practitioners even in order to discuss the challenges confronting Egypt nowadays and how the way out of these challenges. And I believe from my point of view that as long as we can specify priorities, what are the priorities for a roadmap for this period about Egypt is a land full of resources. And actually lately we had a very important report putting Egypt one of the wealthiest nations in the world by ranking them in the 32 country, as a 32 country. So as well as we have, you know, very important resources, and as economists, I can mention a lot of possibilities regarding natural resources, human resources. Human resources, we are quite well endowed of human resources. Unfortunately, we are not capable to use such resources in the best way. And this is actually, this is our dilemma, Nasho. You know, starting decades of development, we have been, you know, concentrating on you know, infrastructure. We have been concentrating on, you know, different building and building without taking consideration properly enough with human resources. Unfortunately, human resources had witnessed during the last decade of deterioration, the systems of education, the system of training, even from a social perspective, you have a lot of problems affecting seriously the labor force of Egypt. And from here it comes that if we succeed from the intellectual, from the national dialogue to discuss the main priorities that we have to concentrate on to use our resources efficiently enough and the wealth we have in Egypt efficiently enough for the benefit of people, because we have to admit that the results of development for the last decade haven't been distributed equally enough among the population, because nowadays we have inequality of income distributions that we can notice everywhere in Egypt. But and this is due to lack of capabilities for the majority of population, specifically youth, and women. And if we can take care of that and shed the light and take the right policies and actions to address human resources properly, as well as what are the economic activities that we have to concentrate on for the short periods that may be reflected positively on generating income. I believe this is the crux of what we need to do for this period. And from here comes the importance of the event of information center regarding how to activate the role of the banking sector. Not only banking sector, banking and non-banking types of finance that can be dedicated in order to, because we have finance and we have other types in order to use our resources properly. So the importance of such topic is quite valid to be addressed in this period.
Right, and maybe now we started to see, I think for the first time we used to talk about this years ago, the concept of having a short goal vision
Yes.
and a long-term vision.
Yes.
And this is, of course, very, very important because we are talking about the sustainable development.
Yes.
So if I'm moving on to the financial support as mentioned by the forum, because yes, I have the banking sector and of course we have the private sector as well.
Exactly.
So how do you see this umbrella or the harmonizing, and because everyone will be working for the sake of attracting more investments, whether we are talking about foreign investments or local investments?
Nashwa, still, despite all efforts that have been exerted regarding infrastructure and regarding, easing the, environment for investment in Egypt, still Egypt is not attracting enough foreign direct investment. Despite that, our studies as economists, Egypt is a land full of resources and full of potentialities for very profitable projects. Since we have, the market size is very good, 100 population, 100 million population. So the market size can be regarded as a very potentiality and opportunity. But still, we have some challenges, that we have to work more, seriously. And I believe that the government is taking responsibility nowadays in order to enhance the role of the private sector, but still we have challenges regarding the efficiency of the market, the efficiency of the Egyptian market. Different types of market. We have the financial markets, the labor markets, the markets of goods and services. Still, we need to improve the efficiency of these markets so that we can proceed in a better way. And we can exploit our resources when we refer to sector by sector, like we are talking about the financial services provided for the private sector. Nowadays, we have a lot of challenges. We have, number one, increasing interest rate. And this increase of interest rate actually has been affected by what's happening in the world economy. And actually, I believe that developed countries, and specifically United States, assuming the responsibility for developing countries regarding what happened to address COVID-19. And United States, by being the major economy, started to actually inject a lot of money in the American economy, approaching trillions of dollars. And this actually has been reflected in inflation. And to address such inflation, they started to increase interest rate nowadays for more than 8 times increasing interest rate. Nowadays, we are approaching 5.5% interest rate. What is the repercussions of that on developing countries? Increasing the burden of debt, increasing their capabilities. A country like Egypt nowadays, we are affected by that seriously. The hot money had been out, and this is the major problem that affected the Egyptian economy. In one day, $20 billion outflowed from the Egyptian economy. So from here it comes that we need to discuss such matters with international economic organization. And yesterday, President Sisi had a talk with Kristalina Georgieva, the IMF. Still, the IMF, when we talk about our commitment with the IMF, still they are pushing for a deterioration of our currency. Despite that, when you discuss this matter, a part of what we are being as economy is related to the international situation. We cannot neglect that we have defects in our management of economy. We are specifying what are the defects of such management. We are nowadays trying to fix these problems regarding how to enhance. First of all, it's about the role of the private sector, and we have to encourage more the private sector. We have to address challenges, and if you would like to do it properly enough, we have to refer to the competitiveness index and doing business, and to specify what are the challenges, and they are quite clear, like dealing with customs. Still, foreign investors having problems. Dealing with taxes, still we have problems. Corruption. I can believe that corruption in Egypt is playing a significant role against, attracting foreign investment. So we have to address corruption properly, and in a mostly firm way, so that to prove to the world that we are serious to combat corruption. All this we have to work in a parallel way so that we can attract foreign direct investment. But it's not only Egypt cannot just talk about the future. Our future is related to foreign direct investment, because we have a lot of capabilities as an economy to be performed in the short time, like the capabilities of the public sector companies. The public sector companies are full of opportunities. And one way to discuss this matter, Nashwa, regarding the role of the financial sector, the banking sector, that our banking sector is having rules that not financing public sector companies. This is a condition, and I don't know why. If we have a partnership between private and public sector, and this, from my point of view, can be regarded as a priority for Egypt nowadays. Why? Because it's quite clear that we have some industries that are quite on that track in order to improve their competitiveness and to enlarge the size of export. And actually, there are efforts done nowadays due to the shortage of foreign currency. Our producers are trying to adapt themselves towards producing at home instead of importing, because there are severe challenges for importing. They are trying to do so. So we have huge opportunities in our public sector companies. Labor force, despite it can need more to be upgraded, but we have labor force, we have machines, we have systems of management. But we are lacking market, the opportunities for marketing internally and externally, and management. And if you have the role of private sector, a partnership between private and public sector, we can activate a lot of these resources. So I believe this should be on top of our priority in order to address this crisis, economic crisis. Still, efforts done are not enough, and we have to activate these efforts. And when we talk, you compare that with the discussion happened in our parliament lately about the budget. Our budget, unfortunately, we have a very challenging budget this year. You can see that all these resources of the public sector, the real return of investment for them is quite minimal. So the result economically is that you are, wasting your resources that can be exploited in a very short period for the benefit of the majority of population. So this is one of the dimensions regarding short-term goals we are talking about, and it could be activated and it could result in very positive repercussions for the economy.
Doctor, many points came to my mind that I would like to discuss. When we talk about it from different perspectives, of course we can see that Egypt now is proactive. Egypt achieved a lot during the past few years, yet all the challenges we are facing, things that happened out of our control. I mean, it was for the pandemic, then followed by the Russian-Ukrainian war, many actually things that came from outside that we cannot help, and of course it happened for the whole world. But what really I'm talking about now is that the diversification of our resources.
Yes.
And we have seen this. I remember recently we talked about mining, for example, in Egypt. We started to see some of the cities who are now specialized, whether we're talking about furnitures, textiles, food, agriculture. We have many sectors.
Yes.
And if talking about how can we work more on this, just for the sake that we can have our own resources.
Yes,
I mean, because this is one of the most important parts, utilizing our resources.
Yes, I agree with you, Nashwa, and this is what we can call building the resilience of the economy. Why? Because in a world full of challenges, and actually when you read the future, events that could happen, taking into consideration the case of polarization taking part nowadays, you can mention that we are about to address severe challenges, more challenges. And from here it comes the importance of building your resilience as economy. And building resilience necessitates, taking consideration of your resources, how to benefit from your resources efficiently enough, and how to make some kind of satisfaction or like for self-food security. This is quite important for an economy with large population, and we actually started to do that by increasing the production of wheat and by encouraging, taking care of our agricultural sector. All these can be considered, like you mentioned, as very important steps to be taken in order to activate using your resources. We kept, as economists, saying for the last decades that we need to address our resources more properly, not to rely intensively on importation. We relied completely on importation, and most activities in Egypt, we neglected industrial sectors, agriculture sector, the service sector had dominated, and at the lowest part, not the service sector with its, the possibility to generate income, but at the lowest side. And from here it comes, we need nowadays, like you mentioned, to return back into how to use our resources. And part of it, as you mentioned, mineral resources. Why mineral resources are important? Egypt started taking care of two important resources that are, from my point of view, are essential. Mineral resources and petrochemicals. Why these two are quite important? Because by manufacturing mineral resources and increasing value added in mineral resources and petrochemicals, we can have the most important product necessary for the industrial sector, for most industries. So these can be regarded as enhancing our capabilities for increasing competitiveness of our industrial sector for most industries. And we have actually, according to our studies, we have a comparative advantage in several industries in Egypt. Nowadays, Egypt is gaining momentum in food industry, and we are doing quite well. It needs some steps to be taken in order to activate your capabilities. We are exporting only $4 billion of food industry. This figure can be duplicated in several times, by some proper policies to be taken. And we can mention other industries like ready-made clothes, even in electrical and in, electronic product. Nowadays, Egypt is starting to be on its way to do that. So I believe that taking right policies and on top of them, taking care of the human resources can play a significant role for the coming period, inshallah.
And also the flexibility, or how Egyptians were able, just as you mentioned right now, accommodating with the challenges and working within.
Yes, and this is by building capabilities. Building capabilities for most Egyptians should be on top priorities. Why? Right. Because building capabilities may enable people to adapt better, to find more opportunities, to have choices even. And if you have choices, you can select and you can take a better decision so that you can enhance your situation and by that the situation of the economy as a whole.
Right. Dr. Youmn Hamaki, Professor of Economics and Shams University, always a pleasure having you with us on the show. Right, and moving on to some light news, then we'll be back with more on The Breakfast Show.